Hello, lovely people. Thank you for joining Sari and I again on our continued discussion of the origins, connections, and corruption of the Primeval Thaig. In the first part of our tinfoiling, Sari gave an overview, and then we got into the landmarks near the Thaig, the timeline when the place got discovered twice before Bartrand and Huck's Steep Roads expedition, and the elements within the ancient crypt. We went on to speak about the massive amount of red lyrium veins and what the red lyrium idol was created for. I believe we stopped at how the idol can morph into the various weapons based on who wields it. So let's bring up about the idol being a tool. It's so true in the comic book The Red Wraith, in which I'm really bad with names, like forgetting who is who, that they used the red lyrium idol to craft what looks like an arcane warrior sword to stick in front of the sarcophagus after Shirelles was put in there. And then they used dragon fire to mark Shirelles and make him the Red Wraith. So being a shape-shifting type of item, the sword is not only good for slashing, but it was great for healing the Red Wraith until the Red Wraith's arms got lopped off, because that's the only way to cut him off from being healed by the sword.
Yeah, and in the Dark Fortress comic, as far as what we learn from Fenris's ritual, they kind of used the same thing for him. And the Blue Lyrian Enchanted Sword and a fire-like magic, which is so interesting to think about, because it almost seems like forging something or even enchanting something, and fire magic is the perfect example of forging something. So as if like they're using human or elf, of course, whatever live specimen on this, and forging them into a powerful lyrium-infused fighter. So to me, the whole situation is a forging-like process, and Shirelles in this case is just used with red lyrium. And then also Fenris states in Dark Fortress, this ritual has to happen fast, compared to Daenerys, because Daenerys did it by himself, but now it seems like other mages are in league with this, so they're all doing the ritual at once, for Shirelles in this case, which is dangerous. I think it's like a forging ritual, because why fire? Out of all the magic, it's fire.
Correct me if I'm wrong, there's also a different type of fire magic, because the fire magic that was used on Fenris was primal magic versus dragon fire that was used on Shirelles to create him into Red Wraith. So I wonder if there's a big difference there too, of the type of fire that you said to create different entities.
I always think like dragonfire is such an interesting aspect, because dragonfire is like, it's very hard to blight a dragon. It's possible, but it takes a while. So I always think, oh wait, maybe they have to use dragonfire because some component to it, but I doubt that. There is a significance to why they are different. Like, of course, blue lyrium reacts to magic quite well. We know that when they're all used for the same purpose, like it regains mana. But red lyrium seems to be a process with this one that we don't yet know, with magic at least.
I wonder if Andrew discovers something to make her void armor and weapons.
I would say that's a huge possibility.
I mean, it's very likely that the Evanuris, when they killed the Titan, didn't realize something that they did, and Andrew, hanging out down there a lot, discovered red lyrium and its power and made weapons and armor. Of course, how does that lead to the Primeval Thaig and the idol being there is if those if those dwarves were the one who was helping Andrew make the armors and weapons. That far back?
It is a possibility just because the Shalbertal forged weapons. So if they stated that their workers were soulless...
Witness, soulless servants.
Yeah. Like, that's what I just think of the Shalbertal. They definitely must have seen the dwarves make these weapons and maybe were inspired to create them themselves, or made the dwarves do it themselves. And in this case, that little painting is definitely an imagery of Mythal.
Andrew, you mean? Or Mythal?
Andrew, sorry, did I say Mythal? And that painting just relates straight to the possibility that Mythal and Andrew and maybe many other Evanuris did forge weapons, either from the Void or, of course, Lyrium, the Titans. I think it's insinuated that none of the Evanuris were, like, really good.
And now we go into the corruption. So it's a combination of blood magic, red lyrium, and the thin veil that might have been there in that area for a long time. In the Band of Three, we were looking into the potential source of the missing slaves and the use of blood magic, as well as why most of the mages in Kirkwall Circle ended up being a Maleficarum. The thought was that there was a relationship between their influence with either the Forgotten Ones or some other supernatural phenomena. What Hawk discovered instead is a Forbidden One, and a memory in Verduthra portrays the Forbidden Ones as having once held a corporal form. However, during an unknown calamity that swept across Elvenan, they abandoned the people and gave up their physical form to become mutable spirits. Thus, the Evanuris exiled them from their lands. And Zembenkik was the one that appears out of the Fell Grimoire. Zembenkik could be the same demon that spoke to the King of Plenacine. Referring back to the Canticle of Threnodies verse 6, King Dermates of the Plenacine made a deal with a female demon to win the war against the Neurominian High King, who's been guided by his oracle and High Priest of Dumont, Valzian. And the Plenacine Forest so happens to be within the vicinity of Kirkwall, the Primeval Thaig, just on the other side of the Vinmark Mountains. So if the female demon that King Dermates spoke to was Zembenkik, then she might have had influence over this entire area, the dwarves of the Abandoned Thaig and the Valdocine Thaig. To add to that speculation about demonic influences, we also know that the Forbidden Ones knew about red lyrium.
So this is the demon called Imshale.
Choice spirit.
Imshale, which is another Forbidden One, was called the gardener because he knew how to cultivate red lyrium, and he also had a thorough knowledge of the alluvions and the crossroads, if you have read the book The Masked Empire. How Zembenkik is related to Dumont is not clear. So the corruption is one thing, but the demonic whispers is another. I was looking back at how many people were whispered to and when. In 2800 Ancient, the old gods are said to begin whispering to humanity from the Black City. This is from the Chantry. They said that these old gods taught the dreamers of the Neurominian tribes magic. Power shifts and these dreamers became both priests and kings among their people. Before negative 1580 Ancient, in the Canticles of Threnodies verse 6, it said that the oracle Thalzian, who served the High King Enteritus of the Neurominians, was whispered to by Dumont and learned blood magic. We know how susceptible dreamers are to demons, and I think even more so with dreamers who can physically enter the Fade. In negative 1815 Ancient, Thalmgohander was whispered to about a city of gold in the north. I'm not sure if it's a reference to the Golden City or just elven territories, like the Temple of Mythal was full of gold leaf painting on the wall.
Yeah.
But in the stanzas, he was quoted as saying to Tirda Brightaxe, "Be my bride and cross the waking, eat the gilded city's fill. North to warmth and golden cities, whispers speak in dreamers' ears."
Golden cities.
So that's why I was wondering, could the Valdocine house be whispered to by a Forbidden One? I mean, Valzian don't really know who whispered to him. He just said that Dumont whispered to him. To me, it's like they didn't describe Dumont. They just heard the whisper of Dumont. It could likely be a Forbidden One who's been whispering to all these people. Now, this speaks to whether the dwarves at the Valdocine house or in the Valdocine Thaig can dream. Could that really be true?
As far as I know, it says in the Primeval Thaig that there's magical things in there. So there has to be either the dwarves had magical affinity there, or here the other side is what the Band of Three concluded was that magisters were hiding underground doing like strange rituals. And a Thaig with a bunch of lyrium, what not better place to do a ritual? That's who I could think is being whispered to, the mages that maybe were in the Thaig.
It aligns a bit to Gerenius since he established trade with King Stonehammer that gives him a lot of leeway to get a lot of lyrium. So that's one possibility. The other is when they were talking about the time when the dwarves were still connected with the Titans. I mean, that brings it even further back, that dwarves were still connected to the Fade, thus to dreams. And demons could have whispered them from there, but that would have meant before the war with the Titans, unless there's something there that kept them connected somehow.
The other thing I can theorize is like that profane or fake profane,
Uh-huh.
a hunger demon,
Uh-huh.
entered into that Thaig out of pure curiosity, according to Anders. That could have been the same situation again, since the veil is thin around that area. We don't know when it got thin, but perhaps a demon or a spirit or a really powerful one happened to just travel there and maybe influence the minds of some of these dwarves, especially a powerful one, especially a powerful spirit or demon.
Like Zembenkik?
Yeah, it could be one of the forbidden ones. And the other thing is possession, of course. That maybe one of the dwarves were possessed and happened to lead the dwarves into their own demise.
And you spoke about the calling. Please enlighten me there.
I mean, it's in my Flemeth video about how Flemeth could be a perpetrator of the calling, or there is a soul entity that is controlling the calling. Mainly this is a possibility because of Corypheus, right? He created a false calling. So it is a possibility that, one, someone can control the calling, and two, it just needs enough magical force to even do it. So perhaps Flemeth either already was the origin of the calling, like Mythal when she died, or she merely just took over the power like Corypheus did for a time. And who else did something similar? Well, Solus did that with the Crossroads. He merely took it over with his power. If there's a link between like whispers, for instance, like Valsian received, or any other significant figures in Thedas in the history, if there's like a link between them, I think there's a definite possibility because, well, as far as what we know about the calling, it's a calling towards blighted creatures, so like the Wardens and the Darkspawn. And the Whispers, which is contrasted and still slightly similar, usually refers to people who are in dreams, like a dreamer, a somniari, or mages. Those are usually the people who are getting whispered to. I don't really see it that common in like non-mages. It's just not common. But the circle of magi usually suspects that those types of whispers are like powerful demons and spirits, and you don't listen to them because of course they're backed by the Chant of Light also disagrees with making bargains with demons or even spirits. So it is a definite possibility that the calling and the whispers are very similar. It makes me think that the calling in itself is a magical entity. With Flemeth speaking it, it would make sense to her regaining, because there's just some reason why she needs the old gods, right? So why not control the calling to make people kill the old gods in her own control and receive that power, like Earthamiel, and just keep going until all the blights have been completed. I mean, that's what Corypheus did for the Wardens. Use the calling to do his bidding.
Right. Well, when you say the calling as being the entity, the dragons were calling to the Darkspawns. I think that's how the Darkspawns knew where to dig to taint the dragon to become Archdemon.
I mean, who better person to control dragons is than Flemeth? I mean, we see it with Yavanna in the Silent Grove, where she's not controlling them, but can literally speak with the dragons. Yavanna also states that Alistair's bloodline awoke the Queen of Dragons, which I always assume is Mythal, and it could be anything really, but if it's linked to Flemeth, then she could be the Queen of Dragons and control all these slumbering dragons. And the other indication that she speaks the calling is when the Well of Sorrows are flipped backwards, and it's like a clear voice of something saying the calling. She speaks multiple times. It's just repeated.
So having Dumat's claws in the Veldenstein Thaig, and to talk about magic and how dragons can do callings and whispers, and makes me very wary that it influenced so much of the minds of the dwarves that live in that Thaig to do something very unconscious to help somebody that is an elf or the dread wolf, or I don't know. Whispers and calling and influence, it's just it's kind of like a mind control magic, isn't it?
To convince people?
Huh.
Yeah, I could see that possibility. it's so interesting to see that the one that does the most whispers, which we know is Dumont, and then Mythal is somehow messing with the blight, at least doing something with it, knows how to uncorrupt a spirit from the blight with Flemeth. It just seems like a really interesting comparison, because Dumont is, I will sit here and say that they definitely have to be related to each other because their goals seem to line up to each other. Like Dumont obviously whispers to these people and eventually led to the blight. Then Mythal or Flemeth knows how to uncorrupt it, a soul or the archdemon. So it's like, these two things are kind of working together. Or if not, then obviously the blight would have to be, I don't know, just it doesn't seem like Mythal's like blaming people for the blight to happen, like that was eventually going to happen, but is finding a loophole to get out of it. So I think they are very similar to each other. But I hate being like, oh, they're the cliche.
There is that altar Mythal on the top of Sundermount, within the vicinity of Kirkwall, to the Grey Warden prisons, to the Primeval Thaig, and I thought it's interesting to have an altar there, and her being such a powerful entity just make me curious if there is this relationship with Dumont.
It's so ironic God of Silence brings the whispers. And then if Mythal speaks the calling, like definitely not a silent god.
Yeah, and being whispered to in a dream versus verbally going up to someone's ears to whisper is kind of like a silent whisper, because nobody see another person talking to you. You know, it's spoken to you in your own dream. Just like the calling, right? The Grey Wardens can hear it. It kind of resonates in them. It's in the blood, and joining fluid has Lyrium as part of its ingredients.
Cole does say that Lyrium has a voice to it. It has a feeling and a voice to it. And so does Red Lyrium. Red Lyrium, I know, is like an angry, like feeling, like a maddening kind of voice. So I always assumed that Lyrium's voices were like from the Titans. I don't think anything else could relate to it. The whole of voices stuff is still, there's just not a lot of information. Like, it exists. There are callings, there are whispers, there are attributes to Lyrium that resembles a somewhat the similar thing, like a whisper. But there's no like actual indication that it's real, or like there's like nothing written down. It's always like people say it, or it's a feeling. So that's the only problem with the calling in all those situations. It just reminds me of that codex that you get in the Fate and Inquisition. I don't know, it's like a really strange codex about how we will be heard again, or so. I'm butchering it, but I think it's on like Red Lyrium somewhere. So that also reminds me of like the voices within Lyrium, because it's next to Lyrium, like that codex. So it only insinuates that yes, maybe the Titans have their own calling. And they do, with what we see in the Descent DLC with Volta. They do lure people to them. So it is a big possibility that they do the same thing, just as perhaps maybe the Evanuris do, or what the Blight does.
Yeah. So we dug a little deeper into the origin of the Valacine house and the elements found within the Thaig. Let's gather all the tidbits together into hopefully a bigger picture. What's so special about the edge of the Free Marches that encompasses Kirkwall, Sundermount, the Grey Warden prison, is that the Primeval Thaig is below all of those landmarks. We also know that around Kirkwall, there's a thin veil, and I'm tying it to the Neriminians had a war with the Plenacine people. Because that's the only war I can think of in history. That was mentioned in the Canticle of Threnodies, which the Chantry removed. There's a lot of shit happening in just this area. There's the Forbidden One, then the Pride Demons, and then a Spectre Dragon, and man, it's just full of corruption, and maybe has to do with the Primeval Thaig, right? Because we don't know when the Red Lyrium started growing in that area, or within that Thaig. If there is some correlation between all the blood sacrifices at Emeris with the Lyrium in the Thaig, that's something. You know, the timeline of the Thaig and when Lyrium was being mined was very interesting as well. We believe that the Valdocine house was the primary provider of lyrium to the Dwarven Empire and likely to the new king of Tevinter, Durinius, who was slowly expanding his empire to become the Tevinter Imperium.
Right.
And that was several hundred years before the First Blight. A lot of people believe that it was the Seven Magisters that used Kirkwall to breach into the Golden City. I mean, that is a possibility if we're saying that they went that far down below the deep roads into the Valdocine Thaig to conduct these blood rituals.
Yeah. So there's been some time with Kirkwall or Amarius being established there.
Yes. And Amarius was established at negative 620 ancient.
Mm-hmm.
But we say that the Thaig is even older than that.
I wish we had a timeline of where it is.
You know what? There are 3 types of calendars in use throughout Thedas. The most common one is the Chantry, and then there's the Tevinter calendar that predates the Chantry calendar by over 1,000 years. Then we have the oldest known calendar, the Elven calendar. What's missing is the dwarves' interpretation of time. The oldest known period that was recorded in memory was the building of the first Great Thaig. They only estimated that the Dwarven Empire was founded 1,000 years before the First Blight, making that out to be in negative 1395 ancient. What dwarves consider primeval could simply be synonymous with ancient, and to imply that the Thaig existed at the beginning of their timeline as self-aware individuals, not as a collective link to the Titans, since they don't remember that at all. With that said, I'm still guessing that the Primeval Thaig could have existed either before or shortly after the war with the Pillars of the Earth, minus the statues of Dumont and the many dragons or ravens until the Valdocine house claimed it as their ancestral home prior to the formation of the Dwarven Empire. And then we also addressed about the Red Lyrium and Red Lyrium idol being there. It's true, there's no way to know whether the Valdocine house was the one who crafted the Red Lyrium idol from someone's instruction or influence, or that they found it and brought it to the Thaig. That's a very gray area there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I did write a note here whether Red Lyrium idol was used during the time of the Titan War. At that time, the dwarves were still connected to each other through their hive minds as a network. You give Red Lyrium to one dwarf in a network, that would have affected the entire network. This Red Lyrium is almost like a toxic waste.
Yeah.
So don't throw toxic waste, kids. It's bad for the environment. Biohazard.
Yeah, it just seems like a bunch of elven artifacts that are they shouldn't be messed with, you know?
We did find a note saying that they were closed off, so when they sealed the gate, all those people in the Thaig grew hungry because they couldn't trade with anybody else, so they started eating the stone. If they were eating the red stone, could they transformed?
I mean, I guess like the profane, as far as what we know, are they related to the dwarves who got consumed? That could be a possibility.
So knowing that the claws of Dumont existed there, is it possible that a ritual was taking place? And
Right, because the claws of Dumont, from what we know, is their blood magic tools. They're altars for using blood magic. Primarily, we know that from the codex that involves Corypheus with an elven slave.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing with the claws of Dumont in the Valdocine Thaig, or Primeval Thaig, they have there's like a red lyrium in between them. And also in the Fade, the same thing. There's red lyrium in between them. Or connected to them. Mm-hmm. So what I could sum up why the claws of Dumont are there, one, it could be for a ritual, and then what better place to have powerful magic if there's a place like a Thaig with a bunch of lyrium. Mm-hmm. Could there be a possibility that whatever magic they used blighted that lyrium within the Thaig? I think what's the biggest suspicion is that the claws of Dumont are blighted with red lyrium. They just have trails of red lyrium in them. So perhaps maybe mingling lyrium with blood magic or maleficarum ends up blighting lyrium?
The dragon head staff left at the crypt could have belonged to Durinius or even an elven mage. Now, the bigger mystery is whether the dwarves of the Valdocine house or Thaig could hear the whispers of Dumont to do its bidding, or the bidding of the elves at the time when dwarves were still acting as witless, soulless servants of the Titans, or if Tevinter King Durinius, who happened to be an ex-high priest of Dumont, convinced the Valdocine house to let them build a ritual room, aka crypt, within their lyrium-rich Thaig. The tale of Andrew bringing plague to her lands is also an indicator as to when Lyrium got blighted below ground, and that there's a small probability that the Primeval Thaig was where she forged her void armor, dooming the dwarves to blighted Lyrium. This scenario will set the timeline of the Thaig to when elves used magic and stones to seal the caverns to the Lyrium mines while cursing the Evanuris for their misdeed. You've given me so much on the Primeval Thaig that it'll be difficult to trim down, but it's a good problem to have. Thank you so much for tinfoiling with me, Saria. I had loads of fun.
Thank you. It was so much fun talking about this.
We opened a bigger can of worms, don't we always?
Yeah, nah, it's fine. It's Dragon Age.
Worms are included. And everybody, please check out Saria's channel. It's spelled S-A-R-I-A.
Yeah, but
Saria.
the link is Sarialu.
Okay, wonderful. I would love to have you back to do some more lore theories. And to everyone who's been listening in or watching the videos, I would love to have you back to do some deep dives together. Until then, be well.